Hi everyone, my name's Jenny. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today to do two book reviews of two prize winners that I read during the month of April. One of them is Milkman by Anna Burns and the other is The Strays by Emily Bitto. Okay, I'm going to start with Milkman. I listened to Milkman on audio and I think that really affected my experience of this book. And I know that a lot of people who have been talking about this book have been, it's right now, it's on the short list for the Women's Prize. It won the Man Booker in 2018. They've talked about how you really need to listen to it because it's hard and it's complex to read. And I can't really speak to that because I didn't try to read it in text form. I did listen to it. What I can say about the audiobook is that it does, to me, enhance the experience because you are listening to a specific type of Northern Irish dialect being spoken by a Northern Irish accent. And so it does 100% put you into the story and give you the correct pronunciation and the correct intonation of the progression of the story. I'm just going to talk about the structure of this book for a little bit because I feel like most of the reviews that I've watched have focused on the structure of the book too much and have not really talked about the underlying themes of the book, which to me are what make it a brilliant story. So it is a rambling story. It rambles and it digresses. And I spoke about this a little bit in a reading vlog I did, but having come from I have Irish descendants, and a lot of members of my family tell stories this way. I don't know if that's why I didn't mind the digressions because I'm used to that form of storytelling. I believe I even kind of talk that way myself. I digress and then I will loop back around to the original thing I was talking about. So to me, that's a very natural way of speaking. It's a very natural way of storytelling, and I didn't find it to be difficult or hard to understand very much at all. There may have been moments when I did feel like I was hearing something repeated, and she did repeat things, but I think she did that because that made sense to the way middle sister, who's the main character, tells you the story. She is an 18-year-old and she speaks in a way and connects things in her brain. This is a very internal, psychological dialogue. You are in her head. You are hearing the stories of her town. You are hearing the stories of the people in her town through her eyes. And so you're not, jumping from character to character and getting different perspectives on a situation. You are only getting her perspective. So she's not going to have a linear internal dialogue with herself, and I think that's what you're hearing in this story. I would like to say that I don't think it's hard or that you shouldn't try reading it because I feel like the themes in this book are really spectacularly managed, and there are things in this story that I have not read in any other story before in my life, and things that are important and things that I think are for me were groundbreaking. Now, perhaps if you're familiar with Irish postmodern literature, you'll tell me that Anna Burns was just using a certain style that's already been formed, and that's fine. But not being a frequent reader of Irish postmodern literature, to me it was refreshing and it was just very compelling. It kept me interested in these characters and in this world that I didn't really know anything about because it's a very specific world to this one character. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the themes in the story, which I think are its strength, and I think it deserved to win the Man Booker. I didn't read all of those books, obviously, so perhaps one of the other books that were nominated I would have preferred, but I can't speak to that right now. But to me, it is a strong, strong story. And the reason I loved it so much is because I could compare it to an onion. There's many layers in this story. Layers that you may not even perceive right away. And what I love about how Anna Burns wrote the story is that those layers weave in and out and come back again and represent themselves in different formats, and gives you a way into the themes that if you miss it the first time, you might get it the second time. If you miss it the second time, you might get it the third time. So I would say for me, the very first layer of this is about patriarchy. Okay, so I love reviews of this book, and only one, which I will link below because his first name is Eden and I'm not sure how to pronounce his second name. It starts with an R. I'm going to link his review because he was the only person that I listened to that actually went into these themes and talked about them, and it had me really happy that someone else got the same things from this book. So patriarchy is laid out for you in its form of dominant structure here, okay? So you are presented with a society that is structured in a very specific way. And why is it structured this way? Well, the dominant structure is patriarchy, okay? The second structure is the political and religious upheaval that is going on because of the troubles in Northern Ireland. The third structure is the town itself and the way that the town functions under these overarching control systems. So the town itself has a lot of gossip. It has a lot of conformity rules. You know, you can't name your children certain names because those represent the British influence. You have to get married at a certain age, have kids at a certain age. You have to marry not the person you really love, but the person who's most appropriate to you based on all these, you know, arbitrary rules that the society maintains in order to kind of protect itself. And then you have an extreme amount of violence that is brought on by these different factions warring against each other. And all these people who are just trying to live their lives in a way that is semi-authentic or in a way that is fulfilling in some manner, but are struggling due to the society in which they are in. And in that way, it reminded me a lot of Do Not Say We Have Nothing by MadeleineThien. If you take Do Not Say We Have Nothing, set during the Cultural Revolution and the Tiananmen Square protests, and you just flop it into Northern Ireland during the Troubles, they're very parallel stories that way. They're telling you very similar experiences, the actual experiences of real people who are living through this type of a society. I think that the other really strong factor in here is that these are most of the stories that Middle Sister tells you about the people in her town are of the people who don't fit into the town. So everyone's trying in some way to just toe the line and move forward. And that's what she's trying to do. But she also has these outlier personality traits that are automatically putting her in a different category. And she's like, but it's not that big a deal. I walk and read, or I'm taking a French class in the evenings. Why is that making me an outlier? And you see how everyone expects you in a small town to function within this box. And if you just deviate like one toe over the line of that box and don't conform to what they think you are, you're just put into this whole other category. Okay, so that's what Middle Sister is. She's coming of age in this time. She's trying to figure out who she is. She's trying to figure out where she fits in this very structured and very ordered and very violent society. And she's just doing these small little things that she doesn't think are big deals, and everyone else is putting her in another category because of that. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is the Milkman. And I just want to clarify for everyone that his position in her life is that of a stalker, okay? I feel like it's kind of glossed over. Yeah, he's interested in her, but she's not interested in him. He is stalking her, okay? He is taking his control as a powerful, violent, married man who has a high status in this unknown counter-revolutionary, like revolutionary organization, and he has marked her. Now, as middle sister is being marked by this man, she's also being observed by the people who are observing him, because he is under observation by the authorities. So you have all these layers of control here. So he's exerting control over her. From the first instance they meet, he doesn't touch her, he doesn't do anything violent, but you feel her internal fear of this man, and you go into her body and you experience what it's like to have someone who is powerful, male, and dominant pushing himself into your life. And that's really the interior part of the layer of the onion. This is where middle sister starts giving up all the things that make her who she is, because this man has come into her life and has decided that she is his target. And that internal dialogue, that description of how she slowly shrivels more inward, becomes more paranoid, becomes more afraid. Even when she tries to speak out, no one believes her. No one believes that she isn't really having an affair with this man. No one believes that she hasn't done anything wrong, even though she's confessing to her mother, to her best friend. So she ends up holding it in and not telling anyone else because she's afraid no one else will believe her. She ends up becoming, you feel her internal feelings of fear, her shuddering, her claustrophobia, as this man becomes closer and closer to controlling everything she does. That is the most brilliant part of this book. That I had never read anything that explained so perfectly what it must feel like. And I'm coming from a perspective of not having been stalked by a man in my life, and I know many women have, so I can't say, for sure if that's the feeling. But to me, I was able to completely empathize with middle sister, completely understand why she was going through what she was going through, and how the stalking and the observations of this man affected her. And I thought that was brilliant. It was exceptionally written. And so it's also a very humorous story. There's also a lot of beautiful parts about connection between people, coming of age and starting to accept your parents for who they are as human beings instead of who they are as your authority figure. Also coming of age and understanding that there's so many other there are many other characters that middle sister describes in this story who are under those same control mechanisms. So she has some really powerful descriptions of other people, maybe boyfriends, relationship with chef, and lots of other things. A lot of rich, deep character studies in this story, and so many layers, so many things. The feminist revolution coming into the town, but how those women are cast aside, but they're also protected by the conventional women. How the town comes together in different moments to protect the children, but are also so subjugated to constant violence, where people are dying, entire families are being killed. There's so much in this, and I don't want to make this video all about Milkman, but I just wanted to advocate for the book because I feel like a lot of people are not reading it because of the hype around it being complicated and around it being really brilliantly written, but just not I don't know, no one really talks about what it's actually about. And there's so much. It's a very rich text. And so that's my that's my take on it. I definitely think it deserved to win the Man Booker. I really enjoyed it. And as for the Women's Prize, again, I haven't read all the books, and I know many people do read all the books and then make their choice. But for me, that story, I don't even think I even gave it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars, but I did thoroughly enjoy the experience, and it's staying with me as a story now. So I feel like that shows its power. Okay, so that was the Man Booker winner that I read in April. And I also read the Stella Prize winner from 2015 in April, The Strays by Emily Bitto. And unfortunately, I did not have the same experience reading this story. So I'd like to premise this by saying that everything about this book ticked all of my personal boxes. Historical fiction, which I love. It's about an artist and an artist commune. I love. It's focusing on female relationships and friendships and how they are complicated and how they evolve and change. Love. All those things would have led me to believe that I would have loved this story. Unfortunately, I didn't think it was successful. It did not follow through with any one overall thematic thread. It didn't get deep enough into the thematic threads. There are some serious things and issues that are brought up in this story, and none of them really have any depth. So this is set in Melbourne, Australia in the 1930s. I have to say, I have no idea what Melbourne, Australia was like in the 1930s. I know she described things. She had lots of descriptive elements of the house that the artist commune is in, of Lily, the main character's house. We meet Lily when she's 8, and throughout the story she's going into her teenage years, and then we catch up with her again in her 50s or 60s. It's not really clearly said. I didn't find that anything about the 1930s in Australia came alive or stuck with me. The art scene apparently was very conservative at the time and controlled in a very specific way, which is a very typical, if you're familiar at all with art history, that's pretty typical of many different areas and eras of art, where there's one dominant style of art that is supposed to be the strong one, and then an outlier will come in, someone who's got a new idea, bringing in modernism, bringing in freshness, challenging social norms. All those things are happening in this story, but again, I didn't find that the art came alive. I found that the artists were unfortunately more cliched. They didn't have a lot of depth in their artistic vision. That didn't come across to me. The bohemian-esque nature of the family, living in a communal style with different artists living in the house, and also Lily, who is the best friend of the middle daughter Eva. She comes and lives in the house and spends a lot of time there, and there's lots of lovely moments described where they do fun things and have crazy parties, and there's drugs and alcohol, and there's there's supposed to be something really bohemian and counterculture about it, and it is described that way. The parents are also neglectful of their children. They aren't being conventional parents, and they think that's okay. Like they're living in a new way. But again, there's nothing really in there that's gritty, that you can sink your teeth into. It's all very along the surface. So that was my problem with the story. I wanted to care about the characters. I wanted to care about what was going on with them. I think Heloise, who is the youngest daughter, and in my opinion, the biggest victim of the story in terms of the parental neglect, was the one I felt the sorriest for. But I just felt like she glossed over things so much, and I kept feeling like there was something that was going to happen in the story. So there was some big reveal of what the rift between Lily and Eva was, why they weren't friends anymore, something horrific that happened. And she kept leading you with anticipation into these moments where Lily would be creeping around corners and staring into rooms and observing the adults doing things. And the adults were never doing anything that impactful. The one huge impactful thing that the artist Jerome does to Eva and to Heloise is never alluded to very well either. Okay, he's been seen spending time with them, but it's not anything suspect really. And I think you have to build in a bit of questionable behavior from the character, so that when you reveal this big, plot twist, or this big transgression that the character is committing, that you actually care about the fact that he's done this horrible thing. And to be honest with you, I just didn't. And so on the surface, I thought this book would be really wonderful. And the last thing I'll speak to is the female relationships. I think the friendship between Lily and Eva was really lovely and was often described in a beautiful way, and was speaking to this platonic connection between women, but also how girls would have this competitiveness with each other, and one girl was more dominant over the other, and the other one just wanted to be in there. But to me, the overall theme of this story was that Lily thought that her family was really ordinary and boring, and that Eva's family was really exotic and cool, and she wanted to be included in that, and she wanted to basically discard her family altogether. And her whole struggle through the whole book, even when she's an adult, is that, yeah, I guess I just had an ordinary life. And I feel that that is such a boring conclusion to a story. And it's very cliched. I mean, being an artist myself, and living my life myself, and observing other artists and how we live, the exotic stereotype of artists being these pushers of boundaries and living on the edge and doing all these things is a stereotype that needs to be dispelled with anyway. And I found that this story didn't really dispel it. It didn't really go into why it was a fabrication, and it just wasn't successful at really, to me, showing and getting deep into an artist's head enough to feel authentic, unfortunately. So I didn't hate the book. I gave it 3 stars. I read it in conjunction with the Read Around the World book club, because for the month of April we were reading one or more of the Stella Prize winners, and it also coincides with Aussie April, so I was really excited to read a new Australian author to me. I think I would read another Emily Bitto book in the future, because I know this was her debut, and I think that perhaps a lot of my problems with the book were due to it being the first attempt, and maybe she's gonna get a bit more depth and teeth in her next novels. So I definitely would try reading her again, but for me, the book was just not successful, and I'm not really sure what the other books nominated for the Stella Prize were in 2015, but it would not have been my choice. So Those are the two books. Let me know if you have thoughts below. I know that there are people who really don't like Milkman and people who really like The Strays. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, and I will be back soon with another video.